Namaskar. Hello and welcome to P Guru's channel. I'm your host Sri Iyer. This is episode number 384 of Daily Global Insights, and joining me is my co-host Sridhar Chityalaji. Sridharji, namaskaram and welcome to P Guru's channel.
Namaskar, good morning on this wonderful Thursday or early good evening to you in India.
Sridharji, markets. Let's start with markets. How are things moving along? Now we are past the midpoint of the week, earnings season, I guess. And where do you see things going, sir?
First, I meant to quickly give you a headline. Markets are in the negative territory. The retail sales continue to demonstrate positive momentum. Macy's just announced the results. Bed Bath and Lowe's, the results were positive. Cisco announced positive. But what really are the headwinds? The real headwinds are that the growth trajectory appears to have headwinds, as well as there are enough indications that the recession is here. UK is reporting, as we speak, UK Finance Minister or Chancellor of the Exchequer is reporting the budget. He says UK is in recession. So therefore, I think we will cover this on Sunday, but the headwinds are here.
And on the G20 meetings, the G20 summit just ended. Sridharji, what are the lessons that one can gather from the G20? Is it still the West versus Russia, sir?
It's still the West versus the Russia. I think there are quite a few lessons that we can take away. First and foremost, I think all the global leaders met and they could freely discuss amongst themselves. And when you look at the various videos, you can see the warmth and people were, ready to get on with it. Clearly, the Russian issue, Russia-Ukraine issue, it is like, we are with you or we are against you. There's a whole bunch of, most of the G20 nations were responsible to ensure that there was a communique which was along the lines of what Modi ji had mentioned earlier in the G7, which is this is not the time for war, it is time to negotiate. So I think clearly that came out. Another conspicuous thing that came out was that as Zelensky completed his discussions, you found that simultaneously, just around the time when he finished, there was a series of attacks launched from Russia into Ukraine, targeting the infrastructure and the power grids. Amongst that melee came out this rocket that fell into Poland, and fortunately, wiser heads prevailed. The initial blame pointed to Russia being responsible around the Presbo region. You can see where it is and how far the Russia is if you imagine the Russian map. And then, of course, NATO, whether Article 4 and Article 5 will be invoked by Poland as a NATO nation. Then you had the wiser count heads prevail, and they recognize that it is a Ukrainian missile, it is not a Russian missile, and Russia to be blamed and Russia to be condemned. I don't know whether there's a war and you're going to expect its consequences. To due credit to Mr. Biden, he said at that meeting when this happened, based on his intelligence, the information, he said that the rocket is not from Russia. But it's not something that is warranted in the middle of a G20, especially when Mr. Lazarov was present at that meeting and watching. And, we discussed the Lazarov issue, whether he was in the hospital or whether he did not go to the hospispital.
Well, that begs the question. Begs the question: was his body, mind, and soul in the meeting?
I very much doubt, Sriji. That's a very leading question, which is namely to we can only speculate. Clearly, his body was in the meeting, whether his mind, his soul was in the meeting, I don't know. It's a question of a strange coincidence. He disappears, and then you have, then Zelensky appears from nowhere in the G20 meeting, and then you have, a tirade of attacks targeting the Ukrainian infrastructure. So this is an unwarranted war, which everybody, including IMF, everybody concedes. At some stage, this war has to come to an end. So that's those are the things, Sriji, and then I'll hand it to you, and then you can make your comments. And there's just one wrap-up comment I'd like to make, Sriji.
Yes, sir. So G20, was it a lost opportunity for the global leaders? Because what we did in P Gurus, we don't let any crisis go waste. We captured the video of the confrontation or verbal jousting between Trudeau and Xi Jinping, and then we kind of traced what are all the different times at which Xi Jinping has, bent the ear of other world leaders. I mean, Imran Khan is still a world leader because at that point he was the prime minister, and that video has gone viral. You can watch it. It's on channel 1 of P Gurus. Sridharji, now India is assuming the G20 mantle. Do you think India can bring about a little bit better rapprochement and a more focused converging goal for the next meeting whenever that happens, sir?
Yes. Before I respond to Sri's question, just two closing observations. One observation is that all compliments and commemorations to Indonesian President Jokowi, I think he conducted an admirable meeting in very difficult circumstances. So he clearly emerged as a winner. You go back and look at our global economy and US dollar slide, Indonesia is going to be one of the top 10 economies. So I think he came out very clearly. I think the second, which I would like to kind of point out and share that information, is that the meeting between Xi Jinping and Mr. Biden, the information that is coming out, and at least based on my sources and some of the journalists who got a briefing, is that apparently Xi Jinping has stated red line is Taiwan. So therefore, it is red line is Taiwan. It is non-negotiable to Biden. That's the message that he seems to have given, contrary to what people are kind of paying out. Then Biden walked away by saying that there is no imminent threat of a war. So those are my two observations. Is a lost opportunity. It is clearly a lost opportunity. The bilateral trade between G19 or G17, G18 nations, if you exclude Russia with China, is astronomical. They never used that as a power to negotiate with Xi Jinping. Instead, they let him loose and allowed him to get away with whatever he needed to do. So those are my kind of the concluding comments on G20. To respond to your question, can India do a better job? I think India will navigate this with not much controversies, but the world is fragmented. I just don't know whether India can bring about a miracle, Sriji.
Just a passing observation, Sridharji, on the names that one finds from Indonesia, Thailand, and so on. Typically, one part of the name is Sanskrit. Like, for example, I think the Indonesian president's last name is, I think, Vibhava or Vaibhava, something like that. I mean, it's kind of mangled a little bit in English, but most of the friends that I have from that part of the world, they all tend to have Sanskrit names. One part of the name, and you've been those parts of the world. I find it very interesting that Sanskrit continues to live on in all these places.
Well, I think that if you recall, the wife of the queen, conducted herself with all the Hindu rituals. There's a number of Hindu temples in various parts of Indonesia. Bali is Hindu. Nusa Dua, where this event was conducted, is right in Bali. So there's a very rich heritage in Southeast Asia. So your observations are very correct, Sriji.
Thank you, sir. And let's take a look at US news. So Trump has announced his 2024 presidential candidacy, and this has elicited mixed reactions from the Republicans. Sridharji, I see 3 polls emerging. How do you see this, sir, in the Republican Party?
If I have to put my money, okay, Trump will eventually withdraw. Trump will eventually withdraw. And either for health reasons or for other things, he will be made to withdraw, and a consensus candidate which he will support will emerge by the time we get to 2024. And now this is, based on knowing President Trump and, having done a little bit of work with him. So the story is, this is my observation that'll come out. I could be completely wrong. This is just purely my speculation, because the groundswell of opinion amongst the Republican Party or within the Republican Party is much against. This is not people. He still will carry 76 million votes because amongst the masses, he is considered, the most what you call contrarian leader, and a contrarian leader is required in Washington D.C. to shake.
Well, let's see how this thing plays out. I was talking about three polls, Sridharji. One is, of course, Donald Trump. The other one is the one that is coagulating around the establishment, which is perhaps Ron DeSantis. And the third one is the one that we don't speak about much, Mike Pence. What do you think he's going to do?
I think there's only two. Either president, there's only two. In my view, I mean, I'm not suggesting, I am right, but I'm just simply stating, I know you have three. You have excluded, if you want to add Mike Pence, then I would like to add Mike Pompeo to that list, because who has had very strong aspirations. He has worked very closely. He is very well known, much more than Mike Pence, around the world as a Republicans are historically around foreign policy, whereas Democrats have historically remained the domestic policy. So I think that when you look at that, Mike is also a candidate. I just don't know whether Mike Pence has the what you call party mandate, and usually the very strong governors come out, as it happened in the case of George Bush, and I believe Ron DeSantis is clearly emerging, not just on the way he won the elections, which is, by the way, it is now Florida is more or less a red state. He won the Democratic Miami-Dade constituency. And then if you take a look at the percentage points, it's pretty close to 20% points. He carried Marco Rubio with him with about 10% plus points. To me, he's even on the governance side in the COVID-19 situation. If you remember, he was not the guy who was shutting down the state. Then when you look at the big natural disaster that struck Florida, his team did an admirable job in managing the federal emergency and domestic emergency programs. And then he managed the buses that was coming into Florida state admirably. So to me, I think that he is very clearly has the party's mandate and mantle.
Thank you, sir. And Republicans have now regained control of the House. The Democrats retain control of the Senate. In terms of what it means for the people of America, the way I see it, and please correct me if I'm wrong, Sridharji, is that the Republicans will control the spending and subpoena power, whereas the Senate will have the control of judiciary appointments. So that will be having like long-reaching consequences. If, let's say, SCOTUS will the SCOTUS become Democrat during the next 2 years, sir? Your take.
SCOTUS may not change because there are not too many retiring judges. Now, SCOTUS increasing the number of judges has to get to the House. If it comes to Senate, then it has to get the 2/3 majority. So I just don't see you see a lot of district level appointments and the High Court or the regional courts appointments being managed, and the judges, they're very important because not all cases come to the Supreme Court, being managed by Biden. Now, let me give you my 2 cents. People can say, hey, there's no red wave, there's no blue wave, the fact is, even if you have one seat majority in the House, then effectively your presidency is over. Your presidency is over. 2 important things you lose. You have no spending capacity. That's number 1. Number 2, for all the allegations and scandals that you have, then the subpoena power and to constitute committees to inquire rests with the House, and there are various subcommittees to organize. We saw that in the first 2 years with the January 6th committee, plus many things. So all issues are now going to come to surface. The illegal immigrations, Department of Homeland Security, COVID investigation as to what happened, what was Fauci's involvement. Then the Hunter Biden, what was his bank statements? The Janet Yellen was saying, unless the House, not Republicans, unless the House asks for it, we can't give the records. Now, as the oversight committee head, they will ask for it. So Democrats and the media, which is running around like headless chook to say that there was no red wave, there's no red wave, there's no red wave. Well, they may not be red wave, there's no blue wave either. So they're not going to be able to stall any of these measures. So Biden's presidency is effectively at a stalemate for the next 2 years, Sriji. This is the message, and we are the only people who are delivering this message.
That's absolutely true, sir. On the ground, that's exactly what it means. Red action, or you can take out the hyphen and say redaction, that is going to be happening for a lot of these programs. I really wish that the GOP controlled Congress gets to the bottom of the shenanigans that took place as part of the PPP. A lot of money, a lot of corruption, and that part is mind blowing, Sridharji. 250 million for a meal scheme for the state of Minnesota, a small city, and much of that money was swindled. Nobody still knows where it went. I mean, this is just one tip of the iceberg. By the way, viewers, I'm going to have a monologue on FTX. The guy has salted away 667 million to $2 billion in Bitcoin somewhere in the world. Nobody knows where it is. And he's sitting in Bahamas. Anyway, interesting things happening. It's become like a James Bond movie. Sridharji, let's go on to India news. 200,000 Indian students are now coming to United States to study. 19% increase. Sir, what does one draw from that? I mean, are these undergrad or graduate students, sir?
It's total number, both undergrad and grad. Average $50,000. If you take, is much more than that. We're talking about close to $10 billion of direct investment into. This was made. This was listening to in one of the Ivy League schools, which I happened to be there when Dr. Jaishankar spoke, and he said one of the things that's happened is, annually India contributes somewhere between $8 to $10 billion of what we call FDI, or foreign direct investment. That is the fee that we send, repatriate into United States. And India has clearly displaced China as number one by way of number of students coming into. I can answer number of students coming into the United States. I can answer the question as to what is driving these people, Sriji, but clearly they feel that the U.S. education is a golden nugget.
Sridharji, bachelor's program in the United States is the best in the world, in my opinion. That's why I asked you that question, sir, because if someone is coming to get their bachelor's in the United States, that is a very, very good thing. They really get grounded in whatever field that they are going to be studying in. Masters, on the other case, there is a little bit leeway. You can kind of, do something and still not completely gain the knowledge. At a bachelor's level, the programs are very, very tough. You have to swim through with sharks. That's what I was going to, curious about. Anyway, that's just my 2 cents of wisdom. Let's take a look at what else is happening on Indian front. India has leveraged the G20 and continues to build strong partnerships with France, the European Union, United Kingdom, Japan, Australia, Indonesia, and West Asian alliances. But overall, there was a free trade agreement that was being talked about between United Kingdom, EU, and India. Where do things stand on that, sir?
I think the United Kingdom, they had discussion. I think they're going to do a fast track on the UK side. The EU, not much has happened. I think France clearly has reasserted and wants to strengthen the bilateral relationship. There was, if you recall, there was some hiccup around the extension of the Rafael deal, but I think they're getting behind and they're moving forward on that. Not on the Rafael deal, but the overall partnership between France and India. There was very clearly discussions with some of the West Asian nations. In fact, the king of Saudi Arabia apparently visited India and then traveled along with him or coinciding with him into Bali summit. That now has led to this accelerated discussion with the Gulf Cooperation Council countries. There are about 6 of them. Saudi is at the top. Saudi, Qatar, Kuwait, UAE, Bahrain, Oman. They constitute the Gulf Cooperation nations. India already has a bilateral. So that seems to be the first cab of the rank within the context of the bilateral partnership.
Sridharji, India's numbers as far as imports and exports are concerned, India has a net deficit of 100 billion, which is this is for April to October 2022, which is not bad. India's GDP is estimated at 3.469 trillion nominal, and the PPP is at 11.65 trillion. Very, very encouraging numbers. And India's forecasted growth looks very good, 7.2% for 2022 and 6.2% for 2023. Inflation has dropped to 6.77 from 7.41% in September. Taking the whole thing in perspective, do you think India can become a net exporter because of the boost in the petroleum processing, which is a new area, sir?
Not in the immediate vicinity, but I think probably within the next 5 years, it probably will become a net exporter as it begins to augment number of manufacturing items where it was a net importer. With domestication of the manufacturing and re-exporting it, I believe that with manufacturing, with agriculture, with food processing, with services, services has been one of the the pillars of India's exports, which is one of the reasons why it is getting a much better cushion against the dollar, against the rupee depreciation. And then, of course, eventually, as you rightly pointed out, that if once India starts doing refining of various grades of crude and starts exporting on behalf of those countries as well as itself, then I think that it is very much within the realms that India will be a net surplus on the trade front.
And people should look at the significance of that, because all the friction is going to move to Hormuz Strait, because the United States is slowly disengaging itself from patrolling the high seas. And when that happens, you will see this exporting of finished goods become a big deal, because much of Southeast Asia will depend on a country like India, which has free access or freer access to take the refined oil across. Like, for example, Southeast Asia, Singapore, South Korea, Japan, and so on and so forth. So we'll have to wait and see. Thank you so much for that update, Siddharji. We are one of the first ones to highlight that there is a new export opportunity for India. And this one, by the way, is a force multiplier. Let's take a look at global news. The attempts by China to bring Nepal under its influence falls flat, with Nepal diplomatically rejecting overtures of China. Now, you had the Chinese vice minister visit, and there were, a whole bunch of, how should I say, meetings that didn't get scheduled. I'm a little unclear on this part, Siddharji. Maybe you can expand on this. Nepal has been under the shadow of the umbrella of China. What is changing now?
November 20th is elections. There's a lot of local and regional elections. Nepal had warned that please don't send any political delegation here. The vice premier or the vice minister for trade and tourism, I think his name is Lee Quinn, visited, landed in Kathmandu, and his initial request was he was coming to visit the 2015 earthquake sites to see how that redevelopment work is going on. He landed and he sought meetings with the prime minister. He sought meetings with the Communist Party leader. Mr. Oli was recently the Prime Minister of Nepal. None of them obliged, and eventually he left for Hong Kong. But this just shows this wolf diplomacy, which is namely you send the guy and you tell them to, force them to accede to your request. Good on Nepal to basically stand up and show some spine and basically say, you're not going to influence us.
See, this is why I guess the video on "Is She a Bully" really doing well, and we have, you're going to see more and more of this wolf diplomacy, and we have to wait and see how bigger nations are going to stand up. The Israeli-owned Pacific Zircon tanker was attacked in the Gulf of Oman on Tuesday with the same series of Iranian suicide drones as those used by Russia on Ukraine. Now, this has been confirmed by the CENTCOM of the United States Central Command. Sridharji, I had just finished saying that the Hormuz Strait is becoming active, and here comes news that the Israeli tanker or Israeli owned tanker has also been attacked. Was there any spillage on the high seas, sir?
No, there was no spillage on the high seas, and I think Israel is highly capable of deflecting any of these what you call missiles trying to attack its ships. Israel knows that its tankers are the target, not of the West Asian nations, but very clearly Iran, and Iran is very active. Iran has also targeted some of the U.S. Tankers, and I think that Israel is very well aware. The point that we're trying to make is Iran is now very active with its drones as a weapon. It has given it the power. It has been tested in the war. It has been tested by its own surrogates, both in Yemen as well as in Lebanon, and then obviously very close to the territories that they occupy in Syria. So I think that this is the warning. How long they will continue to do this, we don't know. Probably they need a seat at the table, which they are not getting right now at the moment, Sriji.
Now, North Korea is launching new ballistic missiles, even as the Quad is conducting exercises off the Sea of Japan. Sridharji, is this again saber rattling on part of North Korea? So these satellite countries, North Korea, Iran, Pakistan, many say that the technology is essentially Chinese with stickers made of the respective countries. What do you think, sir?
I think that I agree with you, which is namely the other surrogates of China operating in that region. I think North Korea is, which has a very extensive border with China. North Korea tries to keep both Japan and South Korea, on the alert on behalf of the Chinese. Iran does it not more than Chinese. I think Iran does it for the Russians because yes, Russia-Iran is a very strategic partnership, and Russia-Iran-Syria is again a very strategic partnership. So you have the surrogates on either side. They said South Korea says they don't know this unknown missile. It's an unknown ballistic missile that they have launched, and it fell, not too far from the South Korean border. So this is as the Malabar exercises, which is now going for almost close to 30 years, which involves the same Quad nations, facilitated and led by Japan, the self-defense forces, as they are called, on the high seas, which is mostly marine naval exercises. India was participating. As this was concluding, these missiles were launched. And I think the North Korean president said that this is against all those renegade meteorite nations of our enemy.
Well, the Vice President of United States, Kamala Devi Harris, or I should say Kamala Harris, is now visiting an island or a city off of Philippines. Can we have the map, please? Because this is very close to the Spratly Islands area, the area that has been much under discussion. Sridharji, she's going to be in Palawan, isn't it?
Correct. She's going to be in Palawan, which is the Mimosa archipelago, and you can see how close it is. She's visiting this place on her way to Thailand and also to a couple of other countries. And apparently she's visiting because to celebrate some cultural event in this venue. You can see from the map where this place is, how this strategic venue was chosen and why she is making this trip right on the threshold of the G20 meet. I have no idea. But it certainly is a very interesting trip that she has planned herself, Sriji.
Sridharji, I can picture the headline here. Harris does a Pelosi, goes to Palawan. So
I think Pelosi is ready. Sorry, Harris is ready for 2024 to be the contestant for presidency.
Well, that's again another interesting development. But there was an article in The Hill. I don't know how many of the viewers read it. I'd given the link to that. I'd had some wild imagination saying that she's going to be displaced by Gavin Newsom, and then Biden is going to step down to allow Newsom to. I mean, it was a big puff piece on Gavin Newsom. So very interesting development. But in terms of the core group for Vice President Kamala Harris, can she count on the progressives, sir, as being in her camp?
I just don't think that Kamala Harris has any friends, Sriji. If there is one, then certainly we haven't seen one in the from the administration or from the House. We haven't seen. She has distanced herself from the progressives in anticipation that she wants to be a. Remember, she was a contestant.
Yeah.
Correct. She was to be. She contested. She finished last, but by a stroke of good fortune, she emerged as the vice president nominee for Mr. Biden, and then the vice president now. So I think she doesn't want to, what you call mix herself up with other things. She certainly wants to emerge as a presidential candidate, Sriji.
Absolutely. And then we also are seeing now Michelle Obama making noises. That's something that you had predicted first, Sridharji. If she throws her hat in the ring, remember, you heard it at DGI first. Sridharji made this claim about a year and a half ago. So a lot of churn started now. A lame duck presidency. At the same time, he's going to be in a lot of hot water. We have to see how much of the Biden troubles stick on to the remaining leadership in Democrats as they try to joust their way for the 2024 election. Final thoughts, sir, and then we can call it a wrap.
Well, I think that we have had a very interesting events unfolding around the world. The great news is that the world leaders met. Issues remain unresolved. And I firmly believe they have not used economics and trade as a butter to sit down and negotiate with Mr. Xi Jinping. Nobody is sitting down and saying, your economy is in trouble. You have COVID shutdown. You are reliant on us. If you don't think you are reliant on us, then you can walk away and not be part of this exercise. I don't think Biden is capable of that talk. And I just don't think there's any leader within the G20 who is capable of making that talk. And that's the problem that we are facing.
Sridharji, Xi Jinping gave a dressing down to Justin Trudeau. He was fully aware that there was a camera covering the entire conversation very closely. We put a snippet of that. So it looks like a new deal was being negotiated between Canada and China, and the details got leaked in the press, and this guy is hopping mad. I mean, that is how democracy works. I don't know what he was thinking.
No, I think Xi Jinping is right. And Xi Jinping said to Trudeau, you got one over me, I'm getting one over you. You decided to, generally when you have a diplomatic protocol, when you have a one-on-one conversation, you just have to be careful as to what you speak out. Then you completely lose the trust. Remember, he's the Prime Minister of Canada. So therefore, for him to have gone and leaked without an understanding with the counterparty, and Xi Jinping did not let go of the opportunity. He basically said, he is a wily man. He said he gave him the appropriate dressing, and you saw, I said, yes, you rightly said, you saw the guy walking to the backstage, not in a very pleasant mood. But these are things which is not required. You may as well have a group of people sitting down with Mr. Biden, with Mr. Xi Jinping, and doing this rather than this. But as you rightly, the concluding is, I think the world has lost the opportunity. We remain fragmented, and this is what is going to lead us into 2023 with a lot of headwinds.
Thank you very much, Sridharji. And that was it for today. And we'll be back on Sunday to talk about markets and the direction the markets are headed next week. And thanks for liking, sharing, and subscribing to our channel, and also for clicking on the bell button. Namaskar.
Namaskar. Thank you. Have a wonderful day, and we'll see you on Sunday.